My new son-in-law publicly humiliated me at the wedding, calling me a pathetic outsider. But when his idol walked right past him to hug me, I realized the family betrayal went deeper than just shame. It was deliberate fraud. Before continuing, write where you are from or what time it is. The verdict slammed into my chest before the ceremony even began. I stood in Faye's chaotic hotel suite, a silk cocoon humming with false urgency. My hands trembled slightly as I held the heavy cream-colored envelope. Inside was a check for $50,000, the last of Eleanor's savings combined with mine, meant to be a foundation for her new life. I had rehearsed the perfect speech about legacy and love. "Faye, honey," I said, extending the envelope, "I wanted to give you this now, something special for your new beginning." She glanced at me, a flicker of annoyance, then snatched the envelope one-handed, pointing at a giant floral arrangement with the other. "Just leave it on the vanity. Lisa, did you confirm the string quartet knows to start exactly at 7 quao?" I stood foolishly with my hands still outstretched. The silk robe swished as she turned away, dismissing 30 years of sacrifice in a single movement. "Just leave it on the vanity." She tore open the paper, glanced at the $50,000 amount, and tossed the check onto a pile of scattered makeup brushes. "Finally, something worthwhile. Thanks." She turned back to the planner, focused entirely on the centerpieces. I backed toward the door, my congratulations lost in the clink of champagne glasses. The great giving had begun, and I was already obsolete. The ceremony was a blur of expensive lace and forced smiles. I walked Faye down the aisle, her hand barely touching my arm, a nervous formality she was eager to complete. At the altar, she didn't look back once. I watched Clyde Harrison, her groom, display her like a newly acquired piece of art, his chest puffed out with a sense of ownership that made my skin crawl. He was the reason for this entire spectacle, a man who married up, seeking pedigree and deep pockets. The reception unfolded at a historic Beaumont mansion, all marble and glittering chandeliers. The elite mingled, their low, rolling conversations about estates and acquisitions washing over me. I drifted to the perimeter of the room, nursing a glass of champagne I didn't drink. I was the financial source, not a valued guest. When the toasts began, I was forgotten, left awkwardly standing while others, many of whom I knew only professionally, spoke first. My own toast was generic and brief, met with polite performative applause that felt like a final dismissal. I retreated, suddenly agonizing over the threads of my tuxedo, wondering if it looked rented. That's when Clyde spotted me. He weaved through the crowd with drunken, exaggerated confidence, his voice already too loud, thick with arrogance. He stopped directly in front of me, blocking the exit. His eyes were cold, despite the whiskey flush on his face. "Look at yourself, Ambrose," he sneered. His voice carried across the polished marble. Conversation slowed, heads turned. "You're wearing a rented tuxedo among people worth millions. You don't deserve to be with the elite." I looked down, swallowing hard. My hands clenched at my sides, fighting the urge to shake. A rented tuxedo. He used my discomfort as a weapon. "This is our world now, old man," Clyde said, his laugh sharp and cutting. "You think writing checks makes you one of us." "Clyde, please," I managed, the plea barely audible. "Not today." A woman nearby whispered, and the humiliation hit harder than any slap. Clyde had won this small private war in front of 300 witnesses. The grand entrance doors opened, and the room's energy instantly shifted, a sudden vacuum of attention. Alistair Vance, the legendary European collector, entered, a man whose opinion could make or break careers in my business. Clyde had tried for 6 months to secure a meeting with him, desperate for validation. Alistair scanned the crowd, his eyes passing over the Beaumont elite, past the frozen mid-boast Clyde, and landed straight on me. He walked forward, no hesitation, straight to where I stood. "Ambrose Woods," Alistair said, his voice warm and genuine. He embraced me, a hug that lasted a beat too long. "Wonderful to see you, partner." I felt myself breathe again, a deep, ragged pull of air. "Alistair, I didn't know you were coming." He kept one hand on my shoulder, turning us slightly so his voice carried to the hushed onlookers. Your family celebration? Never. That 18th century secretary desk you found me, an absolute masterpiece. The provenance was impeccable. He finally glanced at Clyde, acknowledging him as an afterthought. You must be the groom. Congratulations. Your father-in-law has an extraordinary eye for quality. I've learned much from him. I watched the color drain from Clyde's face, leaving him a sickening shade of gray. Around us, the whispers had changed. They're partners. Ambrose Woods is top tier. Clearly we misjudged, Clyde muttered to a friend, his voice strained. He stumbled away, broken and deflated. Alistair excused himself to greet other serious collectors. I stood there, surrounded by the wreckage of Clyde's arrogance and the change in perception, yet feeling only a terrible, aching hollowness. My own daughter hadn't defended me. She'd chosen her husband's cruelty over her father's dignity. Across the room, I saw Faye. Her eyes met mine briefly, then she looked away first. I walked toward the exit, my daughter's laughter, a sound I couldn't remember hearing directed at me, echoing behind me. I drove home through the empty streets of Beaumont, still wearing the tuxedo pants, the heavy air of betrayal suffocating me. I ended up in my study, sitting in the leather chair Eleanor and I had picked out 20 years ago. The walls were lined with framed photos of Faye, her first day of school, her college graduation. In every one, I was smiling, convinced I was building something lasting. Late the next morning, the doorbell hammered insistently. I hoped irrationally it might be Faye coming to apologize. It was both of them. We need the beach house keys, Faye stated, her voice flat. We're leaving tomorrow for the honeymoon. Good morning to you too, sweetheart, I said quietly. Clyde stood behind her, checking his watch. We're on a schedule, Ambrose. Flight to catch tomorrow afternoon. Do you want to come in, have coffee, talk about... We don't have time, Faye cut in. Just grab the keys. I walked to my study, my hands shaking only slightly as I unlocked the property drawer. I held the keys to the beach house, a $340,000 property I'd bought for her last year as an escape and recharge spot. I returned to the door, extending them with an expressionless gesture. Faye, about yesterday, I tried again. What Clyde said to me. She took the keys without meeting my eyes. What about it? It was perfect. Everyone said so. I was just joking around. Clyde chimed in defensively. You're too sensitive. Daddy, can we not do this now? Faye was already walking to the car. We have 100 things to pack. Sure, I said, retreating inside. Have a good trip. We will. And make sure you're available if we need anything while we're gone. I watched their tail lights disappear, feeling like hotel staff who'd just handed over the sweet key card. I wandered to the storage closet, reaching for the box labeled Eleanor's journals, which I hadn't opened since she died 8 years ago. I carried the yellowed pages back to the desk, the faint scent of her perfume rising from the paper. I found an entry from her final months. March 15th. Argued with Ambrose today about Faye's graduation gift. He wants to buy her that condo downtown, $340,000. She needs to learn that money comes from effort, not expectation. He's teaching her the wrong lesson. I stared at her warning, then the phone rang. Mr. Woods, this is Richard Chen from Coastal Fidelity Bank, the voice said. We're calling to verify the documentation for the business line of credit. I'm sorry, what line of credit? For Clyde Harrison Investment Solutions, LLC. You're listed as co-founder and personal guarantor for $200,000. The leather chair fell backward as I stood. I was listed as what? I found the documents, but the signature on the line was definitely not mine. The chair lay abandoned on the Persian rug. The silence in the study was broken only by the frantic thudding in my chest. Co-founder, personal guarantor for $200,000. It wasn't just humiliation now, it was organized, targeted fraud. I moved mechanically to the filing cabinet, pulling financial records that dated back 3 years. My hands were steady now, driven by cold shock, not fear. I pulled out the deeds, the wire transfer confirmations, the paid credit card statements, the downtown apartment I bought for her, the countless emergencies that always required immediate wire transfers, the lavish wedding expenses, the beach house I'd paid for just last year. I spread them across Eleanor's old oak desk, a mountain of paper that represented not love, but leverage. I sat there and did the one thing my antique business had taught me best. I documented, organized, and analyzed. The dining room table disappeared beneath 7 years of bank statements and canceled checks. Each entry felt like a small, precise cut. Faye's college tuition paid in full when she could have taken loans, $160,000. The downtown apartment, deeded in her name, but every tax and utility bill paid by me, $340,000. Clyde's startup that produced nothing but expense reports for luxury dinners and trips to Miami, $75,000 evaporated. The wedding that cost more than my entire life savings had felt like a single day of celebration, $85,000. By dawn, the total was glaring in bold print. $450 in 3 years. That didn't even count her phone bill or the car insurance I still covered. I stood at the window watching Beaumont wake and felt a decision click into place like a loaded magazine. The relationship was transactional. It was time to balance the books. I would take back everything I legally could, not out of spite, but out of necessity. They taught me the language of commerce, and I was fluent. The Beaumont Bar Association gave me 3 names. I chose George Miller, a sharp litigator known for handling elder financial abuse cases with quiet ferocity. His office on Broad Street suggested competence without ostentation, the kind of competence I needed now. Miller read through my documentation with professional speed, property deeds, bank records, Eleanor's poignant journal entries. His expression shifted from neutrality to genuine concern. "Mr. Woods, let me be clear." He tapped the beach house deed. "You purchased this property in your name, allowed your daughter to use it, but never transferred the title." "Correct," I confirmed. "It was an investment property, unlimited access, no ownership transfer." "The downtown apartment is complicated," he continued, "but South Carolina Statute 62-284 allows revocation of gifts for gross ingratitude. Public humiliation and exploitation could certainly qualify." He paused, studying the Coastal Fidelity Bank documents about Clyde's fraud. "Now, this $200,000 credit line, he used your name as co-founder without permission?" I knew nothing about it. They called to verify the paperwork. That's serious. Beyond civil recovery, that's criminal fraud. But we need proof. I recommend a forensic accountant who specializes in investment fraud. The cost is around $5,000, 2 to 3 weeks for a preliminary report. I didn't hesitate. "Do it. I need to know the full scope. If he defrauded me, he may have defrauded others." I signed the retainer check and the authorization form with a steady hand. This signature represented my final step from passive victim to active participant. That evening, I attended an estate auction, a work obligation, an anchor to my old life. I moved through the room, examining pieces with a practiced eye, but my mind was a high-speed processor, calculating legal strategy against antique valuation. I stood before an 18th century secretary desk, similar to pieces I'd sold to Alistair Vance, and realized I wasn't actually seeing it. "The veneer work is extraordinary," a woman's voice spoke beside me. "Beaumont craftsmanship circa 1780. Are you bidding?" I turned. Vivian Carter, the owner of the rival Beaumont auction house. Her reputation was as solid as mine. "Evaluating for a client," I replied. "The provenance is unclear." She studied me with the sharp attention she'd give a questionable attribution. "You're Ambrose Woods, Southern Heritage Antiques. I know your work. You handled the Ruddled estate last year." "Beautiful pieces." She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "But you're somewhere else entirely tonight. Everything all right?" The genuine concern caught me off guard. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's been there. Coffee after this." "You look like you could use a conversation that isn't about furniture." I should have declined, but I felt a sudden, desperate need for human connection outside the toxic circle of my family. I nodded. The cafe overlooked Beaumont Harbor, the evening light turning the water bronze. Vivian ordered decaf. I ordered bourbon in my coffee, a small rebellion. I told her everything. The wedding, the humiliation, the discovery of the bank fraud. She listened, then shared her own story of her late husband's children trying to contest his will. "They claimed I manipulated him," she said. "Legal battle lasted 2 years." "What did you do?" "I fought, and I won. Not just legally. I won back my peace." She met my eyes. Love isn't supposed to feel like extortion. If they can only love you when you give them what they want, that's not love. We talked until the staff began clearing tables around us. I walked her to her car, opened her door, an old-fashioned gesture, and we exchanged business cards. Driving home, my phone lit up with a text from Miller. "Preliminary title search complete. Beach house is unambiguously yours. Draft eviction notice?" My thumb hovered over the keyboard. This was the final hesitation, the last chance to remain the father who said yes to anything. I typed one word: "Yes, proceed." I pressed send, and with that action, I knew I had given the lawyer the name of the man who married my daughter. The week that followed moved with the surreal calm that precedes a massive storm. George Miller called twice with updates. The eviction paperwork was prepared. The bank was formally notified of the fraudulent $200,000 credit application. The forensic accountant was finding alarming patterns in Clyde's investor communications. On Tuesday and Thursday, I had dinner with Vivian Carter. We talked about Georgian furniture, childhood memories, and what comes after loss. I found myself laughing at her stories, sharing my own, the heavy pressure on my chest beginning to lift. Then the honeymoon ended. The morning after Faye and Clyde returned from the beach house, a process server arrived at 9 a.m. The papers were stamped with official weight. Faye Woods Harrison must vacate property within 10 days. Property registered solely to Ambrose Woods. No legal transfer of ownership ever occurred. Simultaneously, Miller's office sent a registered letter to Coastal Fidelity Bank concerning the systematic use of my name in Clyde Harrison Investment Solutions, LLC. I was drinking coffee in my study when my phone erupted. Faye's name flashed on the screen, followed immediately by her picture. I let it ring twice before answering, bracing myself. Her voice was pure, unfiltered rage. "What did you do?" "We just got served with eviction papers from the beach house." "Yes, I sent those," I confirmed, keeping my voice level. "You can't do this. That house is mine. You gave it to me." "I allowed you to use it, Faye. The deed has always been in my name. You need to vacate within 10 days. "You're destroying my marriage." Her voice cracked, dissolving into theatrical sobs. "You can't stand to see me happy. What kind of father does this?" I held the phone away from my ear, listening to the high-pitched hysteria. I waited for any flicker of acknowledgement, of the wedding humiliation, of the years of exploitation, of the fraud her husband committed. None came. In her narrative, she was the victim, and I was the aggressor. "The kind who's been paying for everything while being treated like an ATM," I said quietly, cutting across her performance. 10 days, Faye. "I'll never forgive you for this. Never." "I can live with that." I hung up. That afternoon, my doorbell chimed with aggressive insistence. Through the window, I saw Clyde's dark sedan in the driveway, Faye visible in the passenger seat. Clyde stood on my porch, his jaw tight, his hands clenched into white fists. I was ready. In the study, I had a folder ready. Property deed, tax records, insurance documents, all showing sole ownership, sole responsibility. This was my ground. I opened the door. Clyde launched immediately into threats. "You can't take back a gift. That's not how the law works in South Carolina. We'll sue you for breach of promise, emotional distress. I have lawyers who will bury you in court for years. By the time I'm done, you won't have a reputation left in Beaumont." I stepped aside, gesturing for him to enter. I led him to the study, sitting calmly at my desk. Home territory, psychological advantage. "By all means, consult your lawyers." I laid out the documents one by one, like cards in a winning hand. "Have them review these. This is the property deed filed with Beaumont County, sole owner Ambrose Woods." Clyde grabbed the papers, flipping through them, searching for the loophole he desperately believed existed. There must be a second deed, a transfer document. There isn't. These are the tax records. I've paid property tax for 12 consecutive months since purchase. You said it was for Faye. You told her it was hers. I said she could use it. I never said I was transferring ownership. Words matter, Clyde, especially when you're in the investment business. You should know that. His face shifted from blind aggression to naked fear. This is revenge for the wedding. No, this is property law. I tapped the folder. If you find evidence of legal transfer, present it to my attorney. His card is in the folder. He threw the papers down, the small stack skidding across the desk. He pivoted and stormed out without another word. I calmly gathered the papers, returned them to the folder, and walked to the front door, leaving it open for emphasis. That evening, exhausted, I met Vivian at a small Italian place away from downtown. She suggested it, sensing I'd need refuge. I ordered bourbon neat. "How do you feel now that it's done?" she asked after the waiter left. Terrified, liberated, guilty, justified, all at once. That's normal. The first time I said no to my stepchildren, I literally threw up afterward. How did you get past the guilt? I realized guilt was their weapon, she said, cutting her salmon. They trained me to feel guilty for having boundaries. Once I saw that, the guilt lost its power. Faye said she'll never forgive me. Vivian smiled sadly. And you said, I can live with that. Then you've already won. Not the legal battle, the internal one. I felt the immense weight of that truth. Later, standing by my car, my phone rang. George Miller. I assume they contacted you? He asked. Faye called screaming. Clyde showed up making threats, said he'd sue for breach of promise. Miller chuckled. Let him try. He has no case. Now comes the hard part. They'll try to manipulate you emotionally. Stay firm. I'm done being manipulated. What's next? We wait. Either they vacate or we begin formal eviction proceedings. Also, the auditor called. He's found something significant. Multiple elderly investors. My blood ran cold. Can you come in tomorrow morning? I'll be there at 9 a.m. I pulled into my driveway, the house lights glowing warm against the Beaumont night. I wondered how many other people Clyde had used my name to hurt. I stared at the dark phone in my hand, refusing to check social media. The message on my desk was a promise of war. I didn't sleep well, but I was at George Miller's office by 8:45 a.m., dread pulling at the edges of my focus. Marcus Webb, the forensic accountant, was already there. Documents covered the conference table like evidence laid out at a trial. Mr. Woods, Miller began, his voice serious. Mr. Webb's investigation revealed systematic misuse of your identity and reputation. Webb spread the papers methodically. Your name appears on incorporation documents you never signed, marketing materials you never approved, investor presentations you never saw. I picked up a glossy brochure. It featured my photograph, lifted straight from my gallery website. Strategic advisor Ambrose Woods, renowned Beaumont antique dealer with 30 years expertise in fine acquisitions. How much money did he take from these people? I asked, my voice raw. Total reported investments, $287,000 from 6 individuals. The average age is 71. Webb pushed a bank statement across the table. None of that money went into legitimate business operations. We tracked it to personal expenses, car payments, luxury goods, travel. I traced the forged signature on the incorporation papers. It was almost perfect. He had practiced it. He stole from elderly people using my name while I paid for his wedding. Miller leaned forward. This is securities fraud, identity theft, forgery, and elder financial abuse. South Carolina takes elder abuse seriously. It's a felony with mandatory prosecution referral. I stared at the name of Dorothy Miller, 72, a retired elementary school teacher who had invested $35,000 from her pension savings. That money bought Clyde his expensive suit and his swagger. File the police report, I said, the words heavy and final. Contact these 6 investors. Tell them I had no knowledge of this, and I will help however I can. They deserve their money back more than I deserve family peace. Miller nodded, respect evident in his eyes. I'll make the calls today, and we proceed with the civil suits. We filed two new legal actions, a civil lawsuit demanding the return of the $75,000 I'd given for Clyde's startup as funds obtained under false pretenses, and a petition to revoke the downtown apartment gift under the gross ingratitude statute. The apartment is in her name, I pointed out. Can we really take it back? Public humiliation, fraud using your name, a defamation campaign on social media. That's textbook gross ingratitude, Mr. Woods, Miller said. The apartment title reverts to you if we win. He also drafted a cease and desist letter regarding the defamatory posts. Every post after receiving this becomes knowing defamation. It raises the damages significantly. I signed everything. Each signature was a declaration of war. I returned to my gallery mid-afternoon, emotionally drained. My key was in the lock when Faye's voice stopped me. "Daddy, please, we need to talk." She stood by the entrance, her face blotchy from crying. I let her follow me inside, bracing myself for the performance. "Remember when I was 8 and broke Mom's antique vase?" she asked, her voice cracking. "You said accidents happen, families forgive. Mom always said family comes first. She wouldn't want us fighting." Every word was calculated to hit my trained, paternal responses. Eleanor's memory, childhood innocence, family obligation. I felt my resolve waver despite the criminal documents in my briefcase. The gallery door chimed. Vivian Carter arrived for our scheduled meeting about consignment pieces. She took in the scene instantly. Faye, mid-manipulation and my own conflicted expression. Vivian sat down her portfolio and walked directly to us. "Your father gave you everything," she said to Faye, her voice a quiet steel. "The only thing you don't have is a conscience." Faye's tears shut off like a faucet. "This doesn't concern you. This is between me and my father." "It concerns anyone who won't watch you manipulate a good man. He's given you hundreds of thousands of dollars. You repaid him with public humiliation and fraud." Faye's mask dropped completely. The vulnerable daughter vanished, replaced by cold fury. "You don't know anything about our relationship. He owes me. After Mom died, money was all he knew how to give. Well, I took what was offered." She turned to me, the ultimate betrayal in her voice. "And you? You were pathetic, always trying to buy my love. It worked for years. Now you think you can stop? We'll destroy you. Clyde has plans. You'll regret this." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "We're not done, not even close." The door slammed, leaving a profound silence. Vivian moved quietly, making tea in my back office, giving me space. When she brought the cup, I wrapped both hands around the ceramic, needing the warmth. I almost believed her, I confessed, my voice rough. Even knowing everything, I almost caved. "But you didn't, that's what matters." We sat in silence until my phone buzzed with a torrent of notifications. 3, then 5, then a steady stream. I looked up to meet Vivian's eyes, understanding without words that Clyde's promised counterattack had begun. We read them together, Vivian pulling her chair beside mine. Facebook posts shared 40 times already, heartbroken to share that Faye's father evicted us from our honeymoon home days after our wedding. "We don't understand this cruelty. He's even threatening to take the apartment Faye grew up in. We only wanted family, but he sees us as a burden." Photos were attached. Young Faye on my shoulders at the beach, a captured moment of joy from the wedding, even a photo of Eleanor with the caption, "Wish Faye's mother were here to mediate this family tragedy." The comments accumulated like small digital blades. What kind of father does this? Elder cruelty goes both directions. Praying for you both. My pulse spiked with fresh shame and fury. "I need to respond to this," I said, hands shaking. "People think I'm a monster. My clients are questioning me." Vivian closed the laptop firmly. "Never wrestle with pigs, Ambrose. You both get dirty and the pig likes it. Your reputation will be decided in court, not in comment sections. People who truly know you will ask directly. Anyone who judges you based on social media wasn't really your friend." Following her advice, I drove back to Miller's office. We filed the revocation petition. I signed the cease and desist, drawing the line. This far, no further. That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. You'll regret this. We have proof you're not who you pretend to be. The message on my desk was a promise of war. I knew then that the only path left was to destroy the empire they had built on my good name. The morning brought a cream-colored envelope in handwriting I knew intimately. 6 pages unfolded in my hands, blue ink occasionally smudged. "Dear Daddy," it began, a weaponized term she hadn't used since childhood. I read it standing at my kitchen counter, the coffee growing cold. Each paragraph was a precisely aimed arrow. Memories of Eleanor, guilt about my emotional distance after her death, the calculated suggestion that my gifts were my love language, and she had simply learned to receive love the way I gave it. After Mom died, you were all I had, but you were so sad I couldn't reach you. The gifts were the only way I felt connected to you. I read it 3 times, each reading chipping away at my resolve. I called George Miller. What would happen if I dropped the criminal complaint? Silence. Then his careful attorney voice. The 6 defrauded investors would be impacted, Ambrose. But you don't control the criminal investigation once filed. That's the state's decision now. He added, if you need to see for yourself, meet her publicly. Trust your instincts. I called Vivian next, reading portions of the letter aloud. I can't tell you what to do, she said, her voice worried, but promise me you'll be careful. 2 days later, I sat at an outdoor cafe watching Faye approach. She was dressed down, jeans, a simple sweater, minimal makeup, her performance of vulnerability perfected. She hugged me tightly. We ordered coffee, and she began. I've been thinking about us, about Mom, about how I've treated you, she murmured, tears welling. I want to rebuild, but I need you to meet me halfway. She asked about my gallery, about Vivian, seeming genuinely interested. I'm glad you have someone, Daddy. You deserve happiness. For a dangerous hour, I felt the warmth of hope. But her phone lay face down on the table between us. 3 times during our conversation, it lit up with incoming texts. Each time, her eyes flicked to it. Each time, the tiniest smile crossed her face before she controlled her expression. Someone was texting her during this sincere reconciliation, someone whose messages made her smile while she performed sincerity. We finished coffee. She hugged me goodbye with promises to take things slow. I walked away, then deliberately pulled out my wallet and keys, but left my phone face up on the small wooden table. I walked around the block to my car and waited. 55 minutes later, Clyde walked into the cafe. I waited 10 more minutes, then returned, claiming I'd forgotten my phone. I found it still on the table, but now Faye and Clyde sat together in a corner booth, their backs to the entrance, leaning close. Their voices carried in the afternoon lull. Did you see his face when I mentioned Mom? Faye's voice was triumphant. I thought he'd start crying right there. Clyde laughed. The part about money being his love language was perfect, made him feel responsible. He's almost broken. A few more meetings, he'll drop everything. Blood is stronger. He can't resist his only daughter forever. I retrieved my phone silently. They never noticed me. I walked out carrying the death of my last hope. I drove straight to Vivian's house. I told her everything, the letter, the meeting, the test, what I'd overheard. What do you need right now? She asked when I finished. The question undid me. I talked about the exhaustion, the pain of seeing the woman she really was. Vivian made tea, sat beside me, occasionally touching my hand, just being present. We fell asleep intertwined on her couch. Dawn light found us peaceful. Her phone rang. George Miller. The audit is complete, full report ready, and the district attorney wants to meet. They're moving forward with criminal charges. I held Vivian's hand while Miller explained that everything was accelerating, the investigation, the charges, the reckoning. We drove to Miller's office together. Marcus Webb spread the full audit documents across the conference table. 6 investors, $287,000. But then the shocking details emerged. Forged recommendation letters on fake Southern Heritage Antiques letterhead, a fabricated email account, ambrose.woods.eggmail.com, used to answer investor questions as if I responded. Doctored phone records suggesting I attended investment strategy meetings. Mr. Harrison didn't just use your name casually, Webb said. He created an entire false business partnership around your reputation. That afternoon, 3 of the investors arrived. Dorothy Miller spread her documents with arthritic hands, pointing to the forged recommendation. "Your reputation convinced me," she whispered. "I taught elementary school for 40 years, saved every spare dollar." Robert Chen showed photos of his closed hardware shop. "The $52,000 was my retirement. We trusted the name. I helped them draft their collective police report. I will testify to any and all fraud committed using my name." Miller brought more documents. Beach house eviction granted. Sheriff posting notice today. Apartment revocation hearing scheduled in 2 weeks. Late afternoon, I was at my gallery when Clyde walked in, looking nothing like the confident groom. Unshaven, wrinkled clothes, desperate eyes. Vivian stood immediately, protective. "We need to talk," Clyde pleaded. "Work this out. I'll pay back the $75,000. Just make the criminal investigation go away." "You spent the $75,000, I said, calm and cold. "And the criminal investigation is the state's decision, not mine." "You're destroying us. We'll have nothing," Vivian's voice cut through. "You had nothing. You were living on his money and stolen funds." Clyde left with a final threat, his face contorted. "This isn't over." I got back to my house. The driveway was empty. My property was clean. The sheriff had posted the notice and left. As the officer drove away, I realized the house was empty, and the final piece of their leverage had vanished. The 2 weeks between rejecting Clyde's settlement offer and the apartment hearing passed in a strange duality. On the surface, I maintained the ordinary routine of the gallery. Beneath that calm, tectonic shifts were underway. Vivian Carter spent most evenings with me. We talked about opening a joint gallery space, a vision of combined expertise and collections. George Miller sent periodic updates. The criminal investigation was progressing, and the media was starting coverage. I avoided the news, choosing instead to focus on the future. The morning of the hearing, Miller called with a final update. "Clyde's at the police station now. 6-hour interrogation scheduled. The DA has everything: the audit, the forged documents, the investor statements. His attorneys are already discussing plea deals." The criminal machinery had taken over, operating beyond my control. That afternoon, the Beaumont County Courthouse felt smaller and colder than its importance suggested. Judge Patricia Morrison reviewed our evidence methodically. She was all business, a quiet woman whose gaze missed nothing. We had arranged for Alistair Vance, my partner in the antiques world, to testify. He appeared via video link from Europe, his face large on the courtroom screen, his presence commanding. He testified about the wedding humiliation. "Mr. Harrison publicly stated that Mr. Woods didn't deserve to be among the elite," Alistair said, his voice ringing with authority. "It was deliberate, loud, and designed to demean." I witnessed everything. My attorney presented the bank records, the social media screenshots of the defamation campaign, and the forensic auditor's documentation of systematic exploitation. We showed the financial exploitation that led to the public humiliation, satisfying the high legal bar for gross ingratitude. Judge Morrison's ruling was decisive and immediate. The evidence shows systematic exploitation culminating in public humiliation and criminal fraud. The gift is revoked. She didn't equivocate. The gavel fell with finality. Mrs. Harrison has 30 days to vacate. The empire they'd built on my generosity was officially dismantled. That evening, Vivian and I sat on my couch watching the local news. Beaumont financial advisor Clyde Harrison faces multiple felony charges for allegedly defrauding elderly investors using a stolen identity. The broadcast continued. My name was mentioned. Respected antique dealer Ambrose Woods, whose identity and reputation were allegedly used without permission. 6 victims were interviewed, their faces blurred, but their voices clear. We trusted him because of Mr. Woods' reputation. My name was cleared publicly through facts, not my own defense. The truth had won the social battle, just as Vivian had predicted. Over the following week, Miller forwarded the updates. Clyde's advisory license was revoked permanently. His bankruptcy filing revealed a negative net worth exceeding $400,000. The leased BMW was repossessed. They had moved from the downtown apartment, now officially reclaimed, to a weekly rate motel. The consequences were stacking up, inescapable. 1 week after the apartment ruling, my doorbell rang insistently. Through the window, I saw Faye's car, an older model with a dented door. She stood on the porch, looking genuinely defeated. She wore thrift store clothes, her face bare, the weight loss visible from the stress. There was no Clyde visible. "Daddy, can we talk, please?" she asked. I let her in. For the first time in memory, there was no performance, only exhaustion and genuine fear. "I don't know how to do this," she confessed, looking lost in my living room. "Work, bills, taking care of myself. I never learned. Can you help me one more time?" I sat across from her, seeing clearly perhaps for the first time. Not the idealized daughter I'd imagined, but a woman who'd never developed life skills because I'd prevented the need. "Faye," I said gently, "I gave you everything except responsibility. That was my failure as a parent." She started to interrupt, but I continued. "I'll help you find employment. I'll pay first month's rent somewhere modest, but that's the boundary. No more money, no more property, no more rescue." I handed her an employment agency list, a check for $200, and my business card. "Call me if you need a character reference for jobs. Otherwise, this is where our financial relationship ends." She stared at the check. "So, you're just done? After everything, you're abandoning me?" "I'm not abandoning you," I insisted. "I'm teaching you to stand on your own. The lesson I should have taught years ago. I'll always be your father, but I won't be your bank account." She left without another word. I watched her drive away, feeling grief for opportunities lost, but relief for the boundary finally set. My phone buzzed. "Vivian." "How did it go?" I typed. "It's done. Really done." But the new threat wasn't financial. It was the chilling look in her eyes as she walked away from the house. The emotional toll of that final confrontation settled on me like a blanket of damp sand. I was exhausted, but the house felt lighter, cleansed of the destructive expectation that had lived here for years. I drove to Vivian's, needing her grounding presence. We sat on her porch, the same place where we'd realized our connection meant more than just antiques. "No regrets?" she asked, her voice soft. "Sad, but not guilty," I admitted. She needed that boundary years ago. I know she might fail. She might fail and blame me. "That's not your burden anymore," Vivian said, touching my hand. "You gave her the tools. What she does with them is her choice. Now let's plan our future. Show me those King Street properties." We pulled up listings on her phone, sketching business plans on napkins, laughing at our enthusiasm. The forward momentum was a narcotic against the emotional pain of the past week. 1 month later, Miller's email arrived. Clyde Harrison sentencing complete. Probated sentence, felony record, but no jail time. 5 years supervised probation. Restitution of $287,000 at $4,183 monthly. License revoked permanently. Justice was slow and not entirely satisfying. No jail time for the fraud, but the restitution and the permanent license revocation meant his capacity to hurt others in the financial world was destroyed. I forwarded the sentencing details to the 6 investors with a personal note about the foundation I was establishing. Over the following weeks, Faye sent 2 brief impersonal texts. The first, "Got a job. Hotel front desk. It's hard." I responded, "Proud of you for working." The second, "Found apartment I can afford. Roommate situation, but it's mine. Good. Keep going." The distance allowed us both to breathe, to grow separately. My own financial plan moved forward. I sold both reclaimed properties. The beach house brought in $385,000. The downtown apartment sold for $425,000. After taxes and fees, the net proceeds totaled $680,000. I didn't keep a penny of it. Back in Miller's office, I signed the documents establishing the Eleanor Woods Foundation for Elder Financial Protection. It was dedicated to providing legal aid for elderly fraud victims, supporting financial literacy programs, and offering emergency assistance. The board members included George Miller, Marcus Webb, the forensic accountant, Dorothy Miller, the retired teacher, and me. "You're turning your family's pain into systemic protection for vulnerable people," Miller observed. Vivian and I announced our professional partnership officially. Woods and Carter Fine Antiques and Auctions. We leased a historic space on King Street. Alistair Vance committed to 3 exclusive auctions yearly. The opening was planned for September. One morning in my gallery, I stood before Eleanor's photograph. I spoke to her quietly, acknowledging the truth I had finally learned. I finally understood what you meant about teaching Faye responsibility, not just giving her things. I touched the frame gently. I met someone, Vivian. I think you'd like her. A pause. I'm sorry it took losing everything with Faye to learn the lesson, but I learned it finally. The quiet conversation brought peace, not resolution of grief, but integration of loss into continuing life. We spent a quiet July afternoon on my porch, reviewing the gallery renovation plans. My phone chimed with an incoming message. It was Faye. Dad, I found a place I can afford on my own. First apartment that's really mine because I earned it. Working full-time plus weekend shifts. Exhausted but proud. Is this what you meant about self-sufficiency? Thanks for the lesson, even though it hurt. I showed Vivian, who smiled. She's getting it, I typed carefully. Yes, that's exactly what I meant. Proud of you. We returned to our plans, sitting in comfortable silence as the Beaumont evening settled. What are you thinking about? Vivian asked. About justice, I said. How it doesn't look like I expected. Not a dramatic courtroom victory or triumphant vindication. Just this ordinary evening, planning an ordinary business. Vivian squeezed my hand. That's what justice looks like when it's real. Not drama, but balance restored. The investors were getting restitution. The foundation would help others. My reputation was restored. We were building something together. I set my phone aside and reached for Vivian's hand, watching the summer evening settle around us, and understood that justice had never been about making them pay. It was about learning finally to build a life worth living. The phone rang once, and the voice on the other end was the one I least expected to hear. The call was from Richard Chen at Coastal Fidelity Bank. He was not calling about the fraudulent line of credit, which was frozen and under investigation. He was calling to ask me to meet with his board. My name, Ambrose Woods, reputable dealer, had been dragged through the mud by the media exposure of Clyde's fraud. They wanted to discuss the mitigation of reputation damage and the future relationship with my company, Southern Heritage Antiques. I met with the board the next morning. They were stiff, nervous men in expensive suits, more concerned with liability than ethics. I let George Miller handle the legal positioning, keeping my own words focused on fact. The liability rests squarely with Mr. Harrison, who used forged documents and a fraudulent email identity, ambrose.woods@eggmail.com, to solicit $287,000 from elderly clients, I stated calmly. My action in exposing him, filing the police report, and founding the Eleanor Woods Foundation, which will aid victims of financial abuse, demonstrates my integrity. Chen cleared his throat. Mr. Woods, we appreciate your efforts. We want to ensure this doesn't happen again. We'd like to offer you a position on our community advisory board, focused on preventing elder fraud. It was an explicit attempt to co-opt my crisis, to turn their risk into their asset, but it was also recognition of my restored standing. I looked at Miller, who gave me a slight affirmative nod. I will accept, I said, but my first action will be to review your internal controls concerning the verification of personal guarantees for amounts over $100,000. The board chairman paled slightly, but he agreed. The small victory proved that my reputation, once tarnished by Clyde's arrogance, was now stronger than ever, forged in the crucible of this fight. Meanwhile, the financial engine of my new life was turning. The $385,000 from the beach house sale and the $425,000 from the downtown apartment sale, netting $680,000, flowed directly into the Eleanor Woods Foundation. I was essentially giving away my last remaining liquid assets, reinvesting them into Eleanor's memory and the protection of others. The foundation was not abstract charity, it was personal. Dorothy Miller, the retired teacher who lost $35,000 from her pension, became a powerful and articulate board member. Robert Chen, the widowed shopkeeper, volunteered his time to help with financial literacy workshops. My pain became their shield. My life with Vivian accelerated. We merged our two successful antique businesses, a combination of my deep provenance expertise and her sharp auction management skills. We signed the lease for the historic King Street space for Woods and Carter Fine Antiques and Auctions. We sat for days, spread out on the floor plans, choosing paint colors, lighting fixtures, and even the type of coffee we would serve. It feels like we're building a home, not a business, Vivian noted one evening, her pencil sketching a display case. Maybe we are, I replied. A home built on trust. We celebrated the announcement of the partnership with a small, elegant party. Alistair Vance, flying in from London, raised a toast. To Ambrose and Vivian, he declared, two pillars of integrity uniting to make something truly extraordinary. I look forward to bringing many more masterpieces to your auctions. His public endorsement was the final nail in the coffin of Clyde's attempts to ruin me socially. Later that evening, after the guests left, I found myself in my study. I took down the framed photos of Faye, the ones where I was smiling, certain I was building something lasting. I placed them carefully in a box. It was time to replace them with what was real, not what was imagined. I heard a sound from the living room, the quiet click of the deadbolt. Vivian had stayed the night. The sound felt like permission to live again, permission to trust. The guilt had lost its power, replaced by the quiet certainty of boundaries maintained and a life rebuilt on solid ground. My phone chimed with a text from Faye. Dad, Clyde is taking a plea deal. He says he has to pay restitution of $4,183 a month. I'm scared. I typed a careful response, choosing every word for maximum clarity and minimum emotion. This is the consequence of choices. Focus on your job. You can do this. Then I put the phone down and walked into the living room, leaving the box of old photographs unopened on the floor. I would not let fear steal this quiet victory. But the quiet peace was shattered by a single unexpected text message. The text message wasn't from Faye or Clyde. It was from George Miller, Clyde Harrison's sentencing complete. Probated sentence, felony record, but no jail time. $287,000 restitution at $4,183 monthly. License revoked permanently. The number of words was the only thing that made it feel less like a victory and more like a simple bookkeeping entry. Justice, cold and bureaucratic, had been delivered. The final 2 weeks before the gallery opening were a blur of construction dust and high-stakes negotiation. Vivian and I worked side by side, discussing the patina of an antique breakfront one moment and the terms of a new client contract the next. Our professional lives, built on shared respect and integrity, became the template for our personal lives. I received one final brief communication from Faye. Dad, I found a place I can afford on my own. First apartment that's really mine because I earned it. Working full-time plus weekend shifts. Exhausted but proud. Is this what you meant about self-sufficiency? Thanks for the lesson, even though it hurt. The exhaustion was palpable in the text, but so was the pride. I felt a pang of grief, yes, but no guilt. The lesson, the hard, painful lesson I should have taught her 20 years ago, had finally taken root. Yes, that's exactly what I meant. Proud of you. The next day, I had a final meeting with the board of the Eleanor Woods Foundation. The $680,000 net proceeds from the sale of the reclaimed properties were officially endowed. Marcus Webb showed the initial projections. The foundation could provide legal aid to at least 20 elderly victims in its first year, starting with the 6 who trusted my name. You've honored Eleanor's memory perfectly, Ambrose. Dorothy Miller, the retired teacher, told me, her voice thick with emotion. I realized then that this was the true restitution, not the paltry monthly $4,183 Clyde would pay, but the systemic protection created from the ashes of betrayal. Late July afternoon, Vivian and I sat on my porch, reviewing the final gallery renovation plans. The same space where I'd sat alone, reviewing Eleanor's journals and wrestling with my choices, was now occupied by someone who had helped me answer those questions. What are you thinking about? Vivian asked. About justice, I said. How it doesn't look like I expected. Not dramatic courtroom victory or triumphant vindication, just this ordinary evening, planning an ordinary business. Vivian squeezed my hand. That's what justice looks like when it's real. Balance restored. The investors are getting restitution. The foundation will help others. Your reputation's restored. You and I are building something together. And it's perfect, I said. This quiet, ordinary evening is exactly what I fought for. Not revenge, just life on my terms with a chosen partner. She smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Then let's enjoy our perfectly ordinary evening and plan our perfectly extraordinary future. I set my phone aside and reached for Vivian's hand, watching the Beaumont summer evening settle around us, and understood that justice had never been about making them pay. It was about learning finally to build a life worth living. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.